Hello everyone and welcome back to another lesson. In the last two lessons, we covered some crucial theory. In lesson 8, we learned what our data looks like, i.e. that structured JSON format. And in lesson 9, we learned how we can start to manipulate that data using a little bit of JavaScript. In today's lesson, we're going to put it all together and dissect a node piece by piece so we can understand how the n8n interface is designed to help us work with our data. And we'll do it by using a simple and practical workflow. What the workflow will do is it'll read new leads from a Google Sheet and prepare a personalized email for each of them. Okay, let's get into it. But before I do, a quick reminder to join our Discord group if you haven't done so already. It's a great space for connecting with other people that are also looking to learn n8n. Okay, so let's break down what's on the screen in front of you. As you can see, we have two nodes. The first node is the trigger node. It's a manual trigger node. So in order for us to actually run our workflow, we have to click execute workflow manually. And our second node is a Google Sheets node. And what this node is doing is it is pulling data from a Google Sheet that I created, which I'll show you right now. And the Google Sheet is simply a lead sheet. So for example, if you're a business and you have customers or leads, it's very likely that they'll end up in a database or spreadsheet like this, and that spreadsheet will probably have the contact information from every new customer. For example, first name, last name, and email. And in this spreadsheet, we have 3 leads. We have John Doe, Sarah Smith, and Emily Carter. And if you're a business, when you have leads like this, you can then use n8n to actually run automations using this data. So you can send a welcome email to every new lead that you require. Now, if you're doing that manually, that would obviously take forever, especially if you require a lot of new leads per day. But if you're doing it automatically, then it's easy, it scales. And that's what n8n allows us to do. Okay, let's get back to n8n. Let's start dissecting. The first node that we'll look at is the Google Sheets node. As you can see, the node is divided into 3 main sections. We have input, Google Sheets. This is what I call the configuration panel. And then we have the output. So in the configuration panel, this is where we give the node its instructions. So instead of writing code, we simply fill in these fields like spreadsheet ID and sheet name. And n8n will take these inputs and then handle the API call in the background for us. And then on the right, we have the output. This is the data that the node gets back after it ran. Now, n8n knows that raw data can be confusing, so it gives us 3 different ways to view it. So let's take a look at the schema view first. So schema just means structure. This view doesn't show you the actual data for each lead. It shows you the shape of the data. It tells you that each item we get back from this node will have a first name, that's a string, and a last name, which is also a string, and so on and so forth. This is very helpful for understanding the data you have to work with. Now let's take a look at the JSON tab. This should look very familiar to you from our lesson on JSON. This is the raw, unfiltered data that Google sent to n8n. We can clearly see our array of objects, and each object is an item, representing 1 row from our spreadsheet. Inside each item, we have the fundamental key value pairs that make up our data. This view is your source of truth. It's exactly what the node is working with. Finally, we have the table view. This is the exact same data as the JSON view, just formatted into a clean, easy to read table. Now, I constantly switch between the table view for a quick glance and the JSON view when I need to see the more precise structure. Okay, let's see what happens when we add a Gmail node, because remember, this workflow needs to send an email to every lead in our lead sheet. Okay, so we just find the Gmail node. There's a lot of actions to choose from, but we want to send a message, so we'll click that one. Now, as you can see, the output from our Google Sheets node has become the input for our Gmail node. This is the core concept of an n8n workflow. Data flows from the output of one node to the input of the next. Now our Gmail has access to all all 3 of our leads from our Google Sheets spreadsheet. Okay, so how do we use this input data? Well, let's look at the to field first. So by default, most fields in a node are in a fixed mode, as you can see here. That means that we'll use the exact data that you type in. So if we typed in test at example.com, that means all of our emails would go to this email address because it's fixed and static. But we don't want that. We want to send an email to each lead. So we need to switch this field to an expression. And using an expression, it'll allow us to use JavaScript to build a dynamic value using our input data. And now you don't have to type in any JavaScript per se. All you need to do is just drag the email, for example, from the input field into the to field here. And now this expression is dynamic. So instead of referring to an actual email address, for example, test at example.com, it will refer to the key value pair from the input data. And this one says john.doe at example.com, which means that n8n will iterate over each item that we've received from the Google Sheets node and send an email to every single key value pair that has email. So it'll send an email to john.doe, sarah.smith, and emily.carter. Fantastic. Okay. Now, let's say we want to include the first and last name of each lead in our subject field here. Well, we can easily do that. We can drag in first name, and we can drag in last name. Again, this has to be dynamic because if we typed in actual names, it would mean that all our emails would be addressed to that name that we typed in, but we don't want that. We want it to be dynamic. But as you can see, when we dragged in the first and last name, the result was John Doe. And it looks a bit funny because there's no space in between. This is where we can use a bit of JavaScript to manipulate our data. So let's see how we can do that. We can click that button just to open up the screen a little bit. Get rid of this. And then type in this bit of JavaScript code. If you recall from our last lesson, we just added in a nice space just to separate it out. And that's all we need to do. That's how you can use simple JavaScript in workflows to just achieve a better result than you initially could if you could not use JavaScript. Okay, let's do a quick recap. As we've learned today, we saw that the n8n node is a brilliant visual interface that saves us from the complexity of code. Every node has a configuration section to give instructions to, and an output section to show the results. We learned to view that output as a schema, raw JSON, or a clean table. Most importantly, we saw how the output of one node becomes input for the next, and how we can use expressions to transform that input data on the fly. Okay, that's it for this lesson. But a quick reminder, if you haven't done so already, please do join the Discord group. If you have any questions after watching this video, definitely do ask them in the Discord group, and I'd be happy to help out. And in the next lesson, we're going to talk a bit about credentials, and I will explain a lot more about what that means in the next lesson. So I will see you there. Thanks for watching.